Think back to the weeks leading up to December 21st, 2012. People were genuinely terrified. We saw a sudden surge in emergency supply stockpiling, and some were even building literal underground bunkers to ride out what they thought was the end of days. If you ask most people what caused that panic, they'll point directly to the ancient Maya civilization. The story goes that their grand calendar simply ran out of days, leading the public to believe the apocalypse was firmly scheduled. But what if the government's anxiety heading into that winter had absolutely nothing to do with ancient stone carvings? A very different story claims the real terror was locked inside a highly classified room at Area 51. The claim was that the military possessed a device capable of looking into the future. Every time they fired it up, the projection would run smoothly until it hit one exact date, and then nothing. The machine went completely blank after December 21st, 2012. This single idea took a mystical, ancient prophecy and repackaged it. Suddenly, the apocalypse morphed from a religious myth into a mechanical failure inside a secret military base. Project Looking Glass allegedly functioned as a high-tech observatory for the future, a classified machine capable of mapping out millions of alternate timelines to simulate exactly how global events would play out. The blueprints for this device were supposedly a bizarre hybrid. The designers claimed to have built it by fusing reverse-engineered technology from crashed UFOs with ancient artifacts pulled straight from the deserts of Iraq. So how does a story this wild, sounding less like history and more like a summer blockbuster, manage to convince millions of people online that it is absolute truth? To figure that out, we have to look past the internet rumors, treat this conspiracy like a cold case file, and track the myth all the way back to Patient Zero. The origin of this theory actually starts in 1948. The story claims two American archaeologists walked into the Iraq National Museum and walked out with a pair of highly specific, largely overlooked artifacts. These were ancient cylinder seals, long attributed to the Anunnaki, often described in fringe theories as an advanced alien race. The conspiracy insists these were encoded instructions explaining how to access naturally occurring space-time portals, or stargates. From there, the artifacts allegedly fell into the hands of Majestic 12. This shadowy government group supposedly combined the wormhole instructions with advanced propulsion systems recovered from the famous 1947 UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico. This Frankenstein approach to engineering eventually birthed the Looking Glass device, housed deep underground at S4, a highly classified sub-facility of Area 51. The hardware itself was highly specific. The operator sat in a central seat controlled entirely by human consciousness, while massive metallic rings spun around them to generate intense, space-bending magnetic fields. By anchoring this wild machine to real historical locations like Iraq and famous UFO touchstones like Roswell, the creators of this myth wrapped their sci-fi story in a convincing layer of historical legitimacy. The architect responsible for this intricate narrative is a man named Dan Burish. He came forward claiming he was a microbiologist drafted by the government into a Black Ops initiative known as Project Aquarius. Burish painted S4 as a place of terrifying security. He described a facility divided by painted blue and red lines on the floor. His instructions were clear: stay inside the blue zone, because a step over the red line meant guards were authorized to shoot on sight. His most fascinating claim was his daily assignment. Burish stated he was tasked with studying biological tissue from a captive entity named J-Rod, a being that looked exactly like a classic gray alien. If you trace this timeline diagram branching from the present day, it shows Burish's twist perfectly. J-Rod wasn't an alien from space. He was classified as a P-52, a highly evolved, heavily mutated human who had traveled back from a node 52,000 years in the future. And as you can see on this second timeline branch, J-Rod was fighting a temporal war. Another faction of future humans, the P-45s, actually needed the 2012 cataclysm to happen so their specific timeline would survive. To save Earth, J-Rod and his allies intentionally shut down the Looking Glass machine, severing the connection and allowing our timeline to bypass the disaster entirely. This is an incredibly clever piece of storytelling. By claiming the machine was deactivated to save us, Burrish uses the fact that nothing happened in 2012 as absolute proof that his story is true. It's a compelling narrative, but when we step away from the sci-fi lore and look at Dan Burrish's actual life during those years, the story falls apart. Investigators digging into his background found zero official records of his scientific employment at Area 51. What they did find were documents showing that during his supposed time studying future humans, Burrish was employed as a parole officer in Las Vegas, and despite speaking with total confidence in long-form interviews, Burrish continuously declined to take a standard polygraph test to verify any of his extraordinary claims. Even Bob Lazar, the man who originally popularized the very existence of the S4 facility in the 1980s, wants absolutely nothing to do with Burrish's account, entirely distancing his own claims from the Looking Glass story. When you strip away the stargates and the timeline diagrams, the entire foundation of Project Looking Glass rests entirely on the unverified word of one heavily discredited individual. Yet the myth survives because Burrish was a master of synthesis. He wove real-world events into his fiction, suggesting to his followers that the 2003 invasion of Iraq was actually a secret military raid to secure ancient Anunnaki technology. He didn't build his story from scratch. He smartly hijacked pre-existing, highly popular UFO lore. By dropping his own characters into the Roswell crash and Bob Lazar's established Area 51 framework, Burrish gave his claims immediate, built-in credibility with UFO enthusiasts. Most importantly, he timed his revelations perfectly. He recognized the genuine, growing cultural anxiety surrounding the 2012 Mayan prophecy and offered a thrilling, high-tech explanation for why people were so afraid. Ultimately, Project Looking Glass stands as a masterclass in modern myth-making. It proves that a highly entertaining narrative outpaces the truth every time, and reminds us that, on the internet, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.